All right, let's dive right in, shall we? This stack of cybersecurity resources you shared is pretty impressive. You're clearly ready to tackle this head on. I see strong authentication, incident response, even navigating the legal aspects. Wow.
It's incredible how much it's all changed, even in just the last few years. I mean, it's not just about firewalls and antivirus software anymore. You really have to factor in the human element now, too, which can be unpredictable.
Absolutely. And that's precisely where we're headed with this deep dive. We're going to extract the most important actionable insights from all this material so you walk away with a solid understanding of how to protect yourself or your business. Think NIST guidelines, FTC resources, the whole shebang.
And we have to ground it in reality, too, real world examples, because who wants to get bogged down in theory when you can learn from what's actually happened out there in the wild west of the internet, right?
Exactly. So let's kick things off with something I think we've all struggled with at some point. Passwords. Remember those days when we were told to create these ridiculously complex passwords and then change them every other month?
Oh, I remember. I used to have a whole notebook full of them. And let's be honest, it probably wasn't even that secure, tucked away in my desk drawer.
Right, like that would stop a determined cybercriminal.
Yeah.
But seriously, it turns out all that advice wasn't as helpful as we thought.
It actually made things worse in a lot of cases. People started writing them down, using easy-to-guess patterns, or, my personal favorite, just hitting the same three keys on the keyboard because it was easier to remember. It defeated the whole purpose of having a secure password in the first place.
You remind me of those old cartoons where they just write password on a sticky note and slap it on the monitor.
Exactly. But in all seriousness, the NIST guidelines now emphasize passphrases instead of those complicated passwords.
Passphrases. Okay, so instead of trying to remember TRN NSP0RT 401 2024, I should be thinking, what? Give me an example, because I'm drawing a blank.
Think more along the lines of sunsets over dusty canyons air best.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
It's longer, sure, but it's memorable because it evokes a certain feeling or image in your mind, and it's practically impossible for a hacker to guess randomly. It's much more effective than trying to come up with some random string of characters.
That's actually brilliant. It's so much easier to remember a phrase like that. But even with a killer passphrase, what about those keyloggers and other sneaky programs just waiting to snatch it up?
Ah, that's where two-factor authentication, or 2FA, steps in as your new best friend. It adds that extra layer of security.
Okay, I've heard of 2FA, but honestly, I'm still a little fuzzy on what it actually is and how it works.
Think of your passphrase as the lock on your front door. 2FA is that extra deadbolt you engage for peace of mind.
Okay, I like that analogy. It makes it much easier to visualize. So if my passphrase is the lock, 2FA is that extra layer of protection, just in case someone manages to pick the lock.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that 2FA isn't just about those SMS codes our banks send either. We're talking next level stuff here, things that are much harder for hackers to bypass.
I was just going to ask about that because honestly, those SMS codes can be a bit of a pain sometimes. You know, when you're in a hurry and you have to wait for the text message to come through,
Mm,
it can feel like an eternity.
I hear you. And while those codes are certainly better than nothing, authentication apps that generate time-based codes are far more secure. And then you've got physical security keys and biometric options like fingerprints, which are even tougher to crack.
So if my email and financial accounts were Fort Knox, I'd want more than just a simple padlock, right?
Exactly. Always enable the strongest 2FA your important accounts offer. It's like having that armed guard at the gate, even if you think your lock is already tough to pick.
You've definitely given me something to think about. I need to up my 2FA game for sure. Switching gears a bit, one thing that really struck me while going through these materials was the importance of cybersecurity culture. And not just from the IT department down, but from the very top of the organization.
Absolutely. And it's something a lot of companies overlook. It's not enough to just have policies in place. You need to foster an environment where everyone understands the role they play in maintaining a strong security posture. Think back to that Twitter incident a while back where overgranting access had massive consequences.
That one was a real eye-opener. It goes to show that even tech giants with supposedly top-notch security can stumble if they don't cultivate that security-first mindset throughout the organization.
And it's not just about big companies either. One source I came across mentioned that nearly 90% of security breaches involve some form of human error at some point. It's often not malicious, it's just a lack of awareness or training.
Which is why it's so crucial to empower employees to report suspicious activity without fear of punishment, right?
Exactly. It shouldn't be about placing blame, it should be about learning from those mistakes and strengthening the system as a whole. Think of it like this. A single employee mistake could be the crack in the dam that eventually leads to a flood. But if you have an environment where people feel comfortable reporting those cracks early on, you can prevent the flood altogether.
Okay, I'm really starting to grasp the importance of open communication and a blame-free environment when it comes to cybersecurity. But let's face it, even with the best intentions and precautions, breaches can still happen. So let's talk about what to do when, despite our best efforts, a breach occurs. What are the immediate steps businesses should take to minimize the damage?
That's where having a well-rehearsed incident response plan becomes absolutely essential. It's not something you want to be figuring out on the fly when you're already in panic mode.
So it's like having that fire escape plan, just in case things get a little too toasty in the digital world.
Precisely. It clearly outlines who to contact, what steps to take, who's responsible for what, and it helps you contain the damage quickly and efficiently. Because hoping your tech-savvy nephew can handle it over the weekend is not a solid plan.
Definitely not. It's not exactly the time to be calling in favors from family members. So seriously, who are the key players we should have on speed dial in this scenario?
Your insurance agent should be your first call, honestly.
Insurance agent. Okay, that's not what I would have thought of right away, but it makes sense. You hear about cybersecurity insurance more and more these days.
It's becoming increasingly vital in this day and age. They're often the first responders in a digital battlefield like this, helping you navigate the aftermath and get back on your feet.
That's a great way to put it, digital first responders. What else? Who else should be on our cybersecurity emergency contact list?
Legal counsel, for sure. Data breaches can get legally complicated very quickly, so having a lawyer who specializes in cybersecurity can save you a lot of headaches down the line. And depending on the severity of the breach, you might even need to get law enforcement involved.
Wow, so it really is like assembling your own personal A-team of experts to help you through a crisis.
That's a great way to think about it. You wouldn't face a legal battle or a natural disaster without the right people by your side, would you? It's the same principle with a cyber attack.
I like that analogy.
Mhm.
So we've got our dream team assembled. We've called in the digital first responders. What are the immediate steps we need to take to contain the damage and stop the bleeding, so to speak?
First and foremost, you need to assess the situation. Figure out what happened, how it happened, and the extent of the compromised data. Once you have a clearer picture of the damage, you can start taking steps to contain it. Things like isolating affected systems, changing passwords, and implementing more robust security measures where needed.
It sounds a bit like a triage situation, almost like treating a wound. Stop the bleeding, assess the damage, and then figure out the best course of treatment.
You nailed it. You need to act quickly and methodically to minimize the fallout from a cyber attack.
This has been incredibly insightful. You've really broken down some complex topics in a way that makes sense. But we've only just scratched the surface of this cybersecurity maze. There's still so much to unpack.
Oh, absolutely. But that's for our next installment.
Stay tuned, folks. This deep dive is far from over. All right, welcome back. Ready to dive back into the cybersecurity deep end.
Absolutely. We left off talking about what to do when a cybersecurity incident hits. But let's shift gears a bit and talk about a framework that's become pretty crucial in the field. The NIST cybersecurity framework.
From what I've gathered, it's kind of like the gold standard for organizations looking to build a solid cybersecurity posture.
It's a really valuable tool, and it's not just for those tech giants with endless resources either. The NIST framework provides guidance that businesses of all sizes can actually implement, which I think is really important.
And it aligns with your unique business goals, right? It's not one size fits all.
You got it. It's about being proactive and taking a risk-based approach to cybersecurity, rather than constantly playing catch-up and just reacting to every new threat that pops up. Being proactive is key.
I like that, being proactive.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's break it down for our listeners. What are the core functions of this framework, and how can we actually put them into practice? Give us the real-world, actionable stuff.
Think of it like a cycle that's constantly in motion. Identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. Those are your pillars, so to speak. And you're right, it's got to be more than just a list of words. It's about taking action.
Right. I'm all about action. So let's start with identify. What does that entail? We're not just making a list of all the computers in the office, right?
No, it's bigger than that. It's about understanding your business as a whole, its critical assets, the potential threats out there, and which ones are most likely to come after you. You have to think like a cyber criminal.
So it's about knowing yourself, knowing your enemy, right? Classic strategy.
Exactly. And part of knowing yourself is identifying your vulnerabilities. You mentioned earlier that your employee training records needed a little updating. That's something that should definitely be on your radar. Cybercriminals look for those weak links.
Okay, I'm seeing how this framework is all about connecting the dots and creating a more holistic security posture. So we've identified what needs protecting our crown jewels, so to speak. What's
Yeah.
next?
Next up is protect. This is where you implement actual safeguards to minimize the impact of a potential cyber incident. Think of it like building a fortress around your most valuable assets, those crown jewels you mentioned.
Okay, so we're talking firewalls, antivirus software, those strong passphrases we talked about earlier, all those essentials, right?
Yes, but it goes beyond that. It's also about controlling who has access to what data, encrypting sensitive information so it's unreadable, even if it falls into the wrong hands. And this is a big one, training your employees to be your first line of defense.
You said it before, and I'm sure we'll say it again, the human element. Because even with Fort Knox level security, if someone accidentally clicks on a phishing link, it can all come crashing down. Speaking of which, let's say a threat does slip through the cracks. What happens then? How do we know if we've been breached?
That's where the detect phase comes in. It's about having the tools and processes in place to detect those cybersecurity incidents early on, ideally before they can do too much damage.
I imagine this is where all those fancy intrusion detection systems, security information, and event management tools come into play. The stuff they make movies about with people staring at screens full of code.
That's a big part of it. But it's more than just having the technology. It's about making sure your team knows how to use those tools effectively, to analyze the data they're getting, and to recognize those early warning signs and respond quickly. Speed is key in these situations.
So like that old saying, time is of the essence. The faster you can detect and contain a threat, the less damage you can do, right?
Absolutely. Every second counts in a cyber attack. And that brings us to respond, taking action to contain the damage and prevent a bad situation from becoming a full-blown disaster.
This is where that well-defined incident response plan we talked about earlier comes into play, right? Having that roadmap ready to go so you're not scrambling in the heat of the moment.
You got it. That plan outlines exactly who does what, when, and how. Who to contact, how to communicate with your team, your stakeholders, maybe even the public. It's your playbook for when things go sideways.
So it's like that emergency plan you hopefully have for natural disasters, but for your digital world.
Precisely. It's about being prepared for those oh shoot moments because, let's face it, they happen.
And once the dust settles and you've contained the breach, the work still isn't over, is it? What comes next?
Nope, not even close. No, once you've contained the damage, that's when you move into the recover phase. This is where you focus on getting your systems back online, restoring data from those secure backups we talked about earlier.
And just as importantly, learning from the experience. Every breach, as painful as it is an opportunity to make your systems and processes even stronger.
100%. The NIST framework is cyclical for a reason. You identify weaknesses, protect against them, improve your ability to detect breaches, respond effectively, and recover stronger each time. It's a continuous loop of improvement.
Okay, I'm really starting to see the value of this framework. It's adaptable, it's scalable, and it emphasizes continuous improvement. That makes a lot of sense. But I have to ask, all this talk about sophisticated systems and frameworks, it sounds expensive.
That's a common misconception. You might be surprised to learn that NIST actually has a ton of resources specifically designed for small businesses, walking them through how to implement the framework without breaking the bank. There are affordable options out there.
Okay, that's good to know. Accessible cybersecurity is possible no matter your budget. But I want to get a bit more granular for a moment. We've talked about protecting systems as a whole, but what about the data itself? How do we classify it, and how do we make sure the right people have access to the right information?
That's where data classification and access controls come in. Not all data is created equal, right? Some information, if it falls into the wrong hands, could spell disaster for your business.
Like those secret recipes we hear about, the ones locked away in vaults. Or, in our case, maybe our client database.
Exactly. So you categorize your data based on its sensitivity and value. You might have top secret information financial records, proprietary code, your secret sauce that requires the highest level of protection. And then there's everyday information, internal memos, marketing materials that still needs to be protected, but it's not the end of the world if someone gets a peek.
So we've sorted our data, given it different security clearance levels, just like in the spy movies. Now what? How do we keep the wrong people from accessing those top secret files?
Access controls. Think of them like digital bouncers for your data. They decide who gets in and who's left out in the cold, based on their identity and clearance level.
This is where those role-based access controls come in, right? where someone in marketing can see marketing data, but not necessarily the company's financial records.
Precisely. It's about granting the minimum access necessary for someone to do their job effectively, without giving them access to a whole bunch of sensitive information that they don't need. And it's another area where working with cybersecurity professionals can be incredibly helpful.
It's all starting to come together now. So it's about finding that balance between maintaining a fortress-like security posture and not making it impossible for people to do their jobs,
Right.
right?
You don't want your security to become so cumbersome that it hinders productivity, but at the same time, you don't want to make it so easy that anyone can waltz in and access sensitive information. It's about finding that sweet spot in the middle.
It's all about balance.
Okay.
Makes sense. But I'm curious, what about protecting specific types of data that are particularly valuable to cyber criminals, like financial information?
Protecting financial data is absolutely critical for any business, no matter their size. A breach in this area can be devastating, both financially and in terms of your reputation. We're talking lawsuits, loss of customer trust. It can be a nightmare.
It's every business owner's worst nightmare, right? To wake up and find out that your customer's financial information has been compromised.
Exactly. And what makes protecting this kind of information so challenging is that it's not as simple as just locking it away in a vault anymore. It's spread across multiple systems, both on-site and in the cloud.
Right, it's everywhere, which makes it that much harder to protect.
You need a multi-layered approach. Strong encryption is a must for any sensitive financial data, both when it's being transmitted and when it's just sitting there on your servers.
So whether that data is traveling across the internet or just hanging out in the digital equivalent of a filing cabinet, it needs to be scrambled in a way that makes it unreadable to anyone without the proper authorization.
Exactly. But encryption is only as good as its key management. If someone gets their hands on the keys to your encryption, it's game over. It's like having an uncrackable safe, but leaving the key hanging on a hook right beside it.
Okay, I'm seeing the importance of secure key management now. So we've got encryption, secure key management. What else can businesses do to lock down their financial data and keep those cyber thieves at bay?
We've touched on it already, but having strong access controls is non-negotiable. Only authorized personnel should be able to even get near that data, and even then, they should only have access to the information that's absolutely necessary for them to do their jobs.
It's like that old saying, need to know.
Precisely. And don't forget about third-party vendors or partners. If they have access to your systems or data, you need to make sure they're handling it with the same level of security that you are. No weak links in the chain.
Right, because it only takes one weak link to compromise the entire system. Okay, so strong access controls, both internally and with any third-party vendors or partners, that makes sense. What else?
And let's not forget about having a well-defined incident response plan specifically designed for financial data breaches. Time is critical. The faster you detect and contain a breach in this area, the less damage you'll likely face. It could mean the difference between a minor inconvenience and a full-blown PR nightmare.
So it's not just about having a fire extinguisher. It's about having regular fire drills, so everyone knows exactly what to do if a fire breaks out. Practice makes perfect.
That's a great way to put it. Being prepared is absolutely essential when it comes to cybersecurity.
Okay, this is all fantastic information. We've covered so much ground already, but I want to shift gears just a bit and delve back into the human element of cybersecurity.
Ah, yes, because we can have all the fancy technology and frameworks in the world, but if our employees are clicking on phishing links, falling for social engineering scams, or accidentally downloading malware, it can all be for nothing.
Exactly. They're only as strong as our weakest link, right? So how do we make sure our employees are cyber savvy and equipped to handle these threats?
Ongoing security awareness training is absolutely essential. It's one of the most effective ways to protect your organization from these types of attacks.
Because often it's not malice. It's just a simple lack of awareness. People need the knowledge and the tools to be able to spot these threats and know what to do if they encounter one.
That's exactly right. And this training can't just be a one-time thing either. It needs to be an ongoing conversation, something that's reinforced regularly, especially as new threats emerge.
It's about keeping cybersecurity top of mind,
Yeah.
right? Because it's easy to get complacent, especially when things are running smoothly and you haven't had any close calls.
You have to treat it like any other essential business function. You wouldn't neglect your finances or your marketing, would you? Cybersecurity deserves the same level of attention and investment.
It's about creating a culture of security where everyone understands that it's not just the IT department's responsibility, it's everyone's responsibility.
Now you're getting it. And speaking of creating a culture of security, let's talk about a type of attack that preys on our human nature's social engineering.
The art of manipulation, right? I'm always amazed by how convincing these attacks can be.
It's because they're designed that way. Social engineering attacks prey on human psychology, our trust, our desire to help, even our fear. Whether it's a phishing email, a phone call, or even a face-to-face interaction, it's about tricking people into letting their guard down and giving up valuable information. And unfortunately, these attacks are becoming increasingly sophisticated, making them harder than ever to detect.
It's like those con artist movies, except the stakes are real data and real consequences. So how can businesses protect themselves? How do you train people to recognize these master manipulators and avoid falling for their tricks?
It all comes back to that security awareness training. You need to educate your employees about the different types of social engineering attacks, the tactics they use, the red flags to watch out for. Knowledge is power in these situations.
So it's like teaching them to be cyber detectives, to be able to spot those subtle clues that give away a scam.
Exactly. You want them to be able to spot a phishing email a mile away, to think twice before clicking on a suspicious link, and to be wary of anyone asking for sensitive information, whether it's over the phone, via email, or even in person.
It's a good reminder that cybersecurity isn't just about having the latest technology. It's about being smart, being cautious, and being aware of the potential risks in all of our online and offline interactions.
And remember, if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Trust your instincts and err on the side of caution.
Words to live by in the digital age, for sure. We've covered so much in this deep dive already: passwords, the NIST cybersecurity framework, data classification, social engineering, and I feel like we've only just scratched the surface.
We've only just begun.
But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll explore even more essential aspects of cybersecurity. And we're back for the final stretch of our cybersecurity deep dive. We've covered a ton of ground, but let's be real. Sometimes those cyber gremlins find a way in, no matter how strong our defenses are.
It's true, you can't always prevent every attack, but you can control how you react and recover.
And that's what I really want to dig into in this last part of our deep dive: recovery. Because bouncing back from a cyber attack isn't just about fixing the immediate damage, is it?
Not even close. It's about learning from the experience, strengthening your defenses, and rebuilding trust. It's a whole process.
So walk us through it. What are those critical first steps businesses should take to not just recover, but come back even stronger than before?
Well, those first 24 hours after an incident are absolutely crucial. You need to act fast.
I bet it's all hands on deck, right?
100%. Think of it like a fire alarm going off. Everyone has a role to play. You've got to contain the breach, take affected systems offline if necessary, and of course you have to figure out how the breach happened in the first place. You don't want it happening again next week.
It's like a digital forensics team sweeping a crime scene for clues, right? Dusting for fingerprints. But seriously, that makes sense, understanding the attacker's methods so you can prevent future incidents.
You got it. That's the name of the game. But while you're busy playing digital detective, don't forget about the human element.
Right, because cybersecurity isn't just about bits and bytes, it's about people. And cyber attacks can be incredibly stressful for everyone involved: employees, customers, partners. It impacts everyone.
Absolutely. And how you address that human impact is just as important as fixing the technical issues. Reassuring your employees,
Yeah.
offering support if their personal information was compromised, acknowledging that this stuff is scary.
You've got to address the emotional and psychological fallout as well.
It's crucial. And then there's the whole issue of reputational damage. A cyber attack, even a minor one, can erode trust with your customers, your partners, even your investors.
It's like a digital black eye that can be hard to get rid of.
Yeah.
So how do you even begin to address that?
It's all about communication, being transparent and proactive.
So don't try to sweep it under the rug or pretend it never happened.
No way. The cover-up is always worse than the crime. Be upfront about what happened, what steps you're taking to fix it, and how you're strengthening your defenses to prevent it from happening again.
It's about taking responsibility and demonstrating that you're committed to doing right by your customers, your employees, your partners. Honesty is the best policy.
Exactly. People are more understanding than you might think, as long as you're straight with them. Okay, so we've talked about the immediate aftermath of a cyber attack, but let's dive into some specifics. How do you handle some of the big ones we hear about all the time? Like ransomware, for example. That one seems particularly scary.
It's like the digital equivalent of holding your data hostage.
It really is, and it's become more and more common, unfortunately. And I think what makes ransomware attacks so devious is that they prey on fear and that sense of urgency.
It makes it so tempting to just pay the ransom and be done with it.
Right, but here's the thing, paying the ransom is rarely the solution.
I was just going to ask about that because it seems like the easiest way out, but I guess it's not always that simple.
There's absolutely no guarantee you'll actually get your data back, and you're also more likely to be targeted again. It's like negotiating with terrorists. You're just funding their future attacks.
So what's the best line of defense against ransomware? If paying up isn't the answer, what can you do?
Strong offline backups. I can't stress this enough. Back up your data regularly and make sure those backups are stored offline, where ransomware can't get to them. It's like having a spare key hidden away. Even if the attackers encrypt your live data, you have a clean, unencrypted copy you can restore from.
Okay, so it's like an insurance policy for your data.
Yeah.
Got it. What about those phishing scams we talked about earlier? How can businesses equip their employees to spot those and avoid taking the bait?
It circles right back to security awareness training. Teach your employees about phishing tactics. Help them spot those telltale signs, suspicious sender addresses, grammatical errors, a sense of urgency, requests for sensitive information. These are all red flags.
So it's about slowing down and really looking at what's in front of you before you click on anything. Don't just click blindly.
Exactly. Take a moment to assess the situation. If something feels off, it probably is.
And it's not just about emails either. What about all the social media scams? It seems like they're everywhere these days.
Social media is a goldmine for cybercriminals. They're experts at impersonating legitimate brands and using those platforms to spread misinformation and trick people.
So it's a good reminder to be cautious about what you click on, even if it seems to be from a trusted source.
Exactly. Always double check before you click on a link, download a file, or share anything, especially if it seems too good to be true. Trust your instincts. If something seems off, it probably is.
This is all such valuable advice. But the world of cyber threats is constantly changing. What are some of those emerging trends that businesses need to be prepared for?
One that's impossible to ignore is the rise of mobile threats.
Makes sense, given how reliant we've all become on our smartphones and tablets. We practically live on these things.
And cybercriminals know that. They're targeting mobile devices more and more.
So it's not just about protecting our laptops and desktops anymore, right? Mobile security has to be a top priority.
It has to be. Start with a strong mobile security policy. Require strong passwords or biometric authentication. Encrypt sensitive data. Consider mobile device management or MDM solutions.
So even if a device is lost or stolen, that sensitive data is still protected.
Exactly. But even with the best technical defenses, employee training is still absolutely essential. You can have Fort Knox level security, but all it takes is one person clicking on a malicious link and it all falls apart.
It always comes back to that human element.
It always does. Educate your people, help them understand the risks, and make it clear that they have a critical role to play in keeping your organization safe.
Okay, so mobile security is a big one. What else is on the horizon? What other emerging threats should businesses be thinking about?
Well, one trend that keeps me up at night is the increasing sophistication of cyber attacks. We're not just dealing with those lone hackers in their basements anymore. We're talking about organized criminal groups, even nation-state actors with tons of resources at their disposal.
So it's not really a matter of if a business will be targeted in this environment, but when. And that is pretty sobering.
It is, and it's why it's more important than ever to have a proactive cybersecurity strategy in place. You can't wait for an attack to happen. You need to be prepared.
Don't wait for the alarm bells to start ringing. Be ready before they even think about plugging in those wires.
You got it. Think of it like this. Cybersecurity is a journey, not a destination, and it's a journey we're all on together.
That's a great way to put it. So what's the best piece of advice you can offer our listeners today? What's the one thing they should take away from this deep dive?
Never stop learning. The cybersecurity landscape is constantly evolving, so staying informed is crucial. Read articles, listen to podcasts like this one, take a course.
Knowledge is power.
You got it. And the more you know about the threats out there and the tools and strategies available to combat them, the better equipped you'll be to protect yourself or your organization. And remember, you're not alone in this.
We're all in this together. Right?
Absolutely. Reach out to other professionals in your field, share information, collaborate, support each other. Cybersecurity is a team sport.
I love it, a team sport. I think that's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us for this cybersecurity deep dive. I know I've learned a ton. Until next time, stay safe out there, everyone.